The afternoon sun was soft and warm, the kind that makes the air feel calm and a little lazy. In the middle of the busy city, a small diner sat on the corner of an old street. It wasn't fancy. It didn't shine or glow like the tall glass buildings nearby. But it had clean windows, a bright red door, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting out every time someone stepped inside. People who came there didn't come for style. They came because it felt real. They came because, inside, life slowed down just a little. One of the people walking toward that diner on that quiet afternoon didn't look special at first glance. He wore a simple jacket, the kind anyone could own. His shoes were clean but not new. His hair was neat but not styled. He looked like an ordinary man who just wanted a peaceful place to sit and eat. But he was not ordinary. He was a billionaire. He owned companies and buildings and land. His money stretched further than most people could even imagine. He could fly anywhere he wanted. He could buy anything he saw. But after years of success, something inside him felt empty. The more money he made, the less he trusted the people around him. Too many smiles had been fake. Too many friendships had come with a price. He never knew if people liked him or liked what he had. He was tired of that feeling. So tired that, lately, he found himself doing something strange. He would sometimes leave his expensive car in a private garage and walk through the city like a regular person. No suit. No watch that cost more than a house. No assistant following him. Just him. Alone with his thoughts. That day, he chose the little diner because it looked honest. There were no bright signs trying to pull him in. No fancy menus. Just a place where everyday people stopped by. He wanted to sit where no one knew him. He wanted to be invisible for a little while. He pushed the red door open and stepped inside. A soft bell rang above him. The room smelled like pancakes, fries, and fresh coffee. The sound of forks touching plates and people quietly talking filled the space. A radio near the counter played old songs, the kind that made you feel safe even if you didn't know the words. He stood there for a moment, taking it in. There were workers on lunch break. There was an older couple sharing a slice of pie. There was a young student reading a book between bites of soup. The place felt honest in a way money could never buy. Then he noticed the waitress. She moved between tables with calm steps and gentle eyes. She wore a simple uniform and an apron with a small pen stuck inside the pocket. Her smile wasn't forced. It wasn't loud. It was warm, the kind that made people feel seen. She greeted every person the same way. No matter what they looked like or how they spoke, she didn't rush them. She listened. She was also tired. Anyone paying close attention could see that. There were faint shadows under her eyes and lines on her face that spoke of long days and short nights. But still, she stood tall and treated people with respect. She was a black woman working long shifts in a busy diner. But she carried herself with quiet strength, like someone who refused to let the world harden her heart. The billionaire watched her for a moment. Not in a strange way, but in a thoughtful one. He had met so many people who smiled only when they thought it would benefit them. But this smile, this one looked real. She came over to him with a small pad in her hand. "Hi there," she said kindly. "Go ahead and sit anywhere you like. I'll be right with you." Her voice was warm and steady. He nodded and chose a seat by the window. He liked windows. They made him feel like he was part of the world instead of above it. True to her word, the waitress came back a moment later. "What can I get you?" she asked. He ordered something simple. A sandwich. Coffee. Nothing flashy. As she wrote it down, he noticed how polite she was. She didn't act impressed. She didn't act bored. She just treated him like a person. Not a number. Not a problem, just a person. When she walked away, he let his thoughts wander. For years, he had wondered what real kindness looked like when money was not in the picture. He had seen people become suddenly generous or respectful only after they learned about his bank account. He had also seen waiters and workers ignore people who didn't look wealthy. He had learned to watch small details. Tone of voice, patience, honesty. He had learned that character often shows up in the quietest moments. His food arrived neatly placed on a white plate. The coffee came in a heavy mug. The waitress set everything down with care, as if serving a small meal was just as important as serving a feast. She didn't expect a long conversation. She didn't force one either. She simply made sure he had what he needed and told him to let her know if anything else was missing. He took his time eating. Not because the food was slow to finish, but because he was thinking. He remembered times people had treated service workers badly in front of him, thinking it didn't matter. He remembered how uncomfortable it made him, how wrong it felt. He believed how a person treated someone who had nothing to offer in return revealed everything. And so, as he finished his meal, an idea formed. A simple one, maybe even a strange one, but to him it mattered. He decided to test her kindness. Not in a cruel way, not to embarrass her, but to see whether her respect for people depended on how much she received. He wanted to know if she was kind only when rewarded, or whether kindness was part of who she truly was. When the bill came, it wasn't much. Just a small number on thin paper. He took out some cash and paid for the meal. Then he added a tip, only $5. Not because he couldn't afford more, but because he wanted to see her reaction. Would she roll her eyes? Would she complain to a coworker? Would she treat him differently next time? He knew $5 wasn't much. But he also knew some people reacted strongly to small things. This wasn't really about the money. It was about the heart behind the reaction. Before she came back to collect the bill, he quietly stood up and walked toward the door. He didn't leave right away, though. He stepped outside and paused near the window where he could still see inside without being noticed. He watched as she walked to the table and picked up the check holder. She opened it. She saw the tip. For a moment, she simply blinked. Then, instead of frowning or shaking her head, she smiled softly. She folded the bill, slipped it into her apron, and carried on with her work. No anger, no change in mood, no bitter look, just the same calm kindness she had shown all along. She even looked toward the door, as if hoping to thank him, even though he was already gone. And for the first time that day, the billionaire felt something shift inside him. Something small but powerful. He had expected many possible reactions. Annoyance, sarcasm, frustration. But this quiet gratitude touched him. She was grateful not because the amount was big, but because someone had chosen to give it all. She didn't measure worth by numbers. She measured it by intention. He stood there on the sidewalk for a long moment, feeling the city move around him. Cars passing, people talking, life continuing. He realized he wanted to know more. He wanted to understand who she was beyond the uniform and the apron. Not because he was curious about her life for gossip. Not because he wanted to judge her. But because, after so many years of not trusting anyone, he felt like he had just seen real character in action. He walked away slowly, his simple jacket pulled tight around him, his mind already planning to return the next day. He didn't yet know how much that small diner and that small moment would change everything, not only for him but for many others too. But life has a way of hiding big lessons in small places. And sometimes, all it takes is a $5 tip to uncover the truth about the human heart. The next day arrived quietly, the way ordinary days do. The sky was a soft gray in the morning, then slowly opened into a pale blue as the afternoon went on. People hurried through the city streets, carrying bags, thoughts, worries, and hopes. In the middle of it all, the small corner diner kept doing what it always did, serving food, pouring coffee, and welcoming anyone who walked through the red door. The billionaire returned, dressed simply once again. He walked without drawing attention, just another person blending into the rhythm of the day. Even though he had more money than almost anyone in that city, he felt strangely small when he stepped back into the diner. But it was a good kind of small. The kind that reminded him he was human, like everyone else. The bell above the door made that same soft sound when he entered. The air inside was warm, filled with the smell of bread toasting and coffee brewing. The same old songs played on the radio, like they had been waiting for him to come back. He looked around and saw familiar faces. The older couple at their favorite booth, the student with a book, a tired delivery worker eating a quick lunch. And there she was. The waitress moved between tables with that same steady grace. She smiled as if each smile came from an honest place, not from habit. She checked on customers, filled water glasses, and listened when someone needed a moment to talk. Her kindness wasn't loud. It was soft and calm, like a warm light that didn't need to prove anything. She noticed him and gave a small, friendly nod, the same way she did for everyone. She didn't treat him differently from anyone else. She didn't stare or study him. To her, he was simply another person who had come to eat and rest for a little while. "Sit anywhere you like," she said, her tone relaxed and welcoming. He chose the same table by the window. Something about that spot made him feel grounded, like he could watch life happening without being pulled into it too fast. When she came over with her order pad, there was no sign she remembered the small tip from the day before in a negative way. She didn't seem irritated or distant. Instead, she looked peaceful, like someone who had decided long ago to carry light instead of bitterness. He ordered again. Something simple. She wrote it down and brought it out with the same careful hands as before. He thanked her. She nodded kindly and went back to caring for the rest of the room. As he sat there eating slowly, he thought more deeply about what he had done the day before. Leaving that $5 tip had not been about the money. It had been about trust. He wanted to see what people valued. He wanted to know whether generosity changed depending on the size of the reward. But as he watched the waitress, he began to wonder if maybe the test had taught him something instead. Because there she was, working just as hard as she had the day before. Her smile had not changed. Her patience had not faded. She did not treat people differently based on what they wore or how they spoke. Whether someone left a big tip or a small one, she still took pride in doing her work well. She still made people feel welcome. He noticed small details. When an older man struggled to stand, she walked over quietly and helped steady his arm without making a scene. When a child spilled a glass of juice, she knelt down and cleaned it up with a gentle laugh, making sure the child didn't feel ashamed. When a woman came in looking tired and worn down, the waitress took a little extra time to talk with her, letting her know she wasn't alone. None of it was dramatic. None of it would ever make headlines. But to the billionaire, it mattered more than any business deal he had ever closed. He found himself remembering moments from his own life. He remembered the early days before the money, when he had worked long hours and struggled to make ends meet. Back then, every kind word had meant the world to him. Every person who treated him with respect, even when he had nothing, had left a mark on his heart. But somewhere along the way, the world around him had changed. Or maybe he had. He had become surrounded by people who noticed his wealth before they noticed him. Smiles had become wider when money was near. Praise had become more common. But love and honesty had become harder to find. Watching the waitress, he felt something soften inside him. She reminded him of a truth he had once known very well. The size of a person's heart has nothing to do with the size of their bank account. He stayed longer than he needed to. He finished his food slowly, partly because it tasted good, mostly because the diner felt peaceful. Outside, the city moved quickly, but inside, time stretched gently, like a quiet river. Every now and then, the waitress would check in. "How's everything?" she asked with a gentle smile. "Good, thank you," he would reply. There was no pressure, no rush, only kindness wrapped in simple words. He also noticed something else. The job was not easy. She stood for hours. She carried heavy trays. She dealt with customers who were impatient or distracted. Yet she did not complain. If something bothered her, she handled it privately. To the world, she offered respect. He wondered about her life. Did she have family depending on her? Did she work more than one job? Did she ever get a full night of sleep? He didn't know the answers, but he could feel the weight she carried. The invisible weight many people in service work hold every day. And yet, she chose kindness. He thought again about the $5 tip. He had watched her fold it neatly and tuck it into her apron. Not once had she looked bitter. Not once had she acted like the world owed her something. Gratitude had lived in her eyes, even for something so small. He realized something important at that moment. Many people think character shows up in big moments, in dramatic choices or heroic acts. But he saw now that character often hides in the tiny spaces of daily life. In how someone speaks when they are tired. In how they react when something doesn't go their way. in how they treat those who can give them nothing in return. He finished his meal and asked for the bill. When she brought it, her voice was as warm as ever. "Take your time," she said softly. He placed the money inside, this time leaving more than before. But he didn't do it to make up for something or to test her again. He did it out of respect, out of quiet appreciation for who she was. Then he sat for a moment longer, feeling the weight of a decision forming in his mind. He knew he wanted to speak with her. Not right away, not in a way that would make her uncomfortable, but soon. He wanted to tell her that someone had noticed her kindness, that who she was mattered. But for now, he kept his thoughts to himself. When she picked up the bill and saw the larger tip, she didn't gasp or make a scene. She simply smiled, that same soft smile, the one that came from somewhere honest. She looked toward the window again, as if silently wishing him well. He stood up, walked to the door, and stepped outside. The bell chimed behind him. The city air felt different somehow, cleaner, lighter. He took a deep breath and began walking, but his mind stayed in the diner. He realized that, for the first time in a long time, he was looking forward to the next day. Not because of a meeting or a deal, but because of a simple conversation he hoped to have. A conversation with a person whose heart had quietly reminded him what truly mattered. Money could build towers, could buy cars and houses and planes, but it could not buy the gentle courage it takes to remain kind in a hard world. That, he knew, was priceless. And so the billionaire walked on, carrying with him a small but powerful truth. Sometimes the greatest lessons come not from boardrooms or bankers, but from a quiet diner, a warm smile, and a $5 tip that revealed the true strength of the human spirit. The morning after felt quiet in the billionaire's mind, even though the city around him was as loud and restless as ever. Cars rushed past, people talked on phones, doors opened and closed, and footsteps echoed against the pavement. But somewhere inside, he felt a calm he hadn't known in a long time. It was the calm that comes when a person starts to understand something important, even if they don't yet have the full picture. He found himself walking toward the little corner diner again. It wasn't because he needed food. It wasn't even because he needed coffee. He went back because he wanted to see the person whose small, steady kindness had stayed with him long after he left. He wanted to talk, not as a billionaire, not as someone powerful, but as one human being to another. The bell above the red door gave that same soft ring when he stepped inside. The sound felt familiar now, like a gentle hello. The room had its usual mix of smells, voices, and quiet moments. Sunlight slid across the tabletops, turning simple cups of coffee into small pools of gold. The waitress was there, just as he hoped she would be, moving calmly, listening patiently, offering warmth without effort. She noticed him and gave the same small friendly nod. "Good to see you again," she said with an easy smile. He smiled back, not too wide, just enough to show that the feeling was mutual. He took his usual seat by the window, and soon she came by with her order pad. "Same as before?" she asked. "Yes," he said softly. There were many things he could have said right then, but he didn't want to rush it. He wanted to respect the space she was in, the work she was doing. So he let the moment pass and simply waited. When the food arrived, he thanked her again. She nodded and went back to the rest of the room. He watched her work for a while, noticing once more how gently she handled every situation. A spilled drink, a confused tourist, a customer who seemed upset about something that had nothing to do with the diner. She faced it all with a calm heart. After some time, when the rush slowed down a little, she came back to check on him. "Everything all right?" she asked. He took a quiet breath. This felt like the right moment. "Everything's good," he said. "But if you have a minute later, I'd like to ask you something." Her face didn't tighten with suspicion. It didn't show fear or annoyance. She just nodded kindly. "Sure," she said. "I'll be around." She walked away again, and the billionaire felt a small knot in his chest. He wasn't nervous in business deals. He wasn't even nervous when speaking to large groups of people. But this simple conversation mattered to him in a way he couldn't fully explain. A little while later, when the diner grew quieter, she came back and leaned slightly toward the table, not intruding, just listening. "So," she said gently, "what's on your mind?" He looked down for a second, gathering his thoughts, then looked up again. "I came in here recently," he began slowly, "and I left a small tip, smaller than I normally would. I wanted to see how you might react. I wanted to understand something about people. I suppose it was a kind of test." He paused, watching her face carefully, ready for anger or confusion, but her expression stayed calm. Curious, yes, but not cold. She nodded slightly. "All right," she said. "And what did you want to understand?" "I've spent many years not knowing who to trust," he said softly. "I've seen people treat others better only when they think there's something to gain. I wanted to know if kindness could still exist without a big reward." She listened without interrupting. He could see that she was really hearing him, not just waiting for her turn to speak. "I noticed your reaction," he continued. "You were grateful. You didn't get upset. You didn't complain. You just carried on with the same kindness." For a moment, she was quiet. Then she gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Most people don't know this," she said gently. "But tips, big or small, can mean a lot. Not just for the money, but because they show someone noticed your work. I don't expect anything from people. I don't know their stories. Maybe $5 is a lot for someone. Maybe it's all they can give. My job is to serve with respect. My choice is to stay grateful." Her words were simple, but they were full of depth, full of lived experience. He felt something stir inside him, the way a soft wind moves through trees. "Doesn't it bother you?" he asked carefully. "When people don't give you what you deserve?" She shook her head gently. "I try not to measure life that way," she said. "If I link my kindness to what I get, then my kindness stops being real. I don't know what others are going through. I only know what kind of person I want to be. And I try, even on the hard days, to stay true to that." He let those words sink in. They were the kind of words that stay with a person long after the conversation ends. He wanted to tell her the truth then, not just about the test, but about who he really was. He didn't want to hide behind simple clothes and a quiet table anymore. "There's something else I should say," he said softly. "I'm not just an ordinary customer. I have more than enough money, more than I ever really need. I've built companies. I've seen success. But I've also seen people change because of it. I'm sorry if what I did felt unfair. I wasn't trying to trick you. I was trying to understand." She looked at him, surprised but not overwhelmed. Her eyes didn't suddenly fill with calculation. She didn't straighten her back or change her tone. She simply saw him, the person, not the money. "I appreciate you telling me," she said calmly. "But honestly, it doesn't change anything for me. I would have treated you the same either way." And he believed her. It was rare for him to believe something that quickly. But truth has a feeling, and he felt it then. He leaned back slightly, his heart both heavy and light at the same time. "You reminded me," he said quietly, "that kindness without conditions still exists." She smiled again, but this time it carried a little more warmth. "I think the world gives us chances every day," she said. "Chances to be bitter and chances to be kind. I've had my share of hard times, long hours, worries, moments when it would have been easy to let the darkness win. But I don't want to live that way. I don't want my heart to harden. So I choose the other path, even when it's hard." The billionaire looked around the diner. At the worn floor, the simple tables, the light catching the steam from fresh coffee. Then he looked back at her. "Most people wouldn't see this place as special," he said softly. "But I think I'll always remember it." She gave a light laugh. "It's just a diner," she said. "No," he replied gently. "It's where I remembered something important." A customer called for her from across the room, and she gave an apologetic nod. "I should get back to work," she said kindly. "But thank you for sharing that with me." "Thank you," he said back, and he meant it more deeply than she could know. As she walked away, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. A weight he had carried for years. The weight of doubt, of mistrust, of wondering whether goodness still existed in a genuine form. He stayed for a while longer, not because he needed to, but because he didn't want to rush away from the feeling. He watched life move through the diner. He listened to the soft clink of dishes, the quiet laughter, the comforting hum of conversation. For once, he didn't feel like a billionaire surrounded by walls of caution. He felt like a person who had been seen, and who had seen another human clearly in return. When the time came to leave, he placed his payment on the table. Not as a statement, not as a display, just as a quiet thank you. But more important than the money was the decision he carried with him as he stepped outside. He had been searching for something real, and in the simple kindness of a hard-working woman who chose gratitude over bitterness, he had finally found it. As the bell above the door rang behind him and the city welcomed him back into its fast-moving current, he knew this was only the beginning. Something in him had shifted. Something in his heart had awakened, and he would not ignore it. What he didn't yet realize was just how much that small, honest conversation would change the path of his life, and the lives of many others who had never even stepped inside that little corner diner. The next few days passed slowly in the billionaire's mind, even though the world outside seemed to move faster than ever. He kept thinking about the small diner, the warm light inside, and the quiet strength of the woman who worked there. Every memory felt clear, like a page in a book he could turn back to again and again. He had told her part of the truth already. He had said he had more than enough money, but he hadn't shared the full story. He hadn't told her just how large his world really was, or how lonely it sometimes felt. He wanted to, but he also didn't want to overwhelm her. He didn't want to change the simple, honest space between them. Still, something inside him whispered that the time was coming when he should tell her everything. Not because he needed attention, not because he wanted to impress her, but because he wanted to honor the truth. He felt that honesty was a gift, and she had already given him so much of it through her actions and words. So one afternoon he returned to the diner once more. The sky outside was painted with long strips of gold and pink, the kind of evening that feels soft and thoughtful. The familiar bell above the red door rang as he entered. He looked around and felt that same sense of peace wash over him. There she was again, moving through the room with quiet grace. The kindness in her eyes hadn't faded. Her smile still carried warmth. She greeted him like she always did, without pretending, without exaggeration, just with simple kindness. He took his seat by the window. She brought him his usual order without him even having to ask. That small gesture touched him deeply. It meant he wasn't invisible here. He wasn't just another passing face. He was someone remembered. For a while, they didn't speak of serious things. She checked in every now and then. He thanked her each time. But they both felt a kind of understanding between them, like there was a conversation waiting patiently for the right moment. Eventually, when the diner grew a little quieter and the rush slowed, she paused beside his table. "You seem deep in thought today," she said gently. He nodded. "I am," he replied honestly. "There's something I want to share with you. Something more than what I've already said." She pulled out the chair across from him just slightly, not fully sitting down, but resting there for a moment. Her face stayed calm, open, ready to listen. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't eager. She was simply present. And that, more than anything, made him feel safe enough to continue. "I told you I had money," he began softly. "But the truth is, I have more than what most people could ever imagine. Companies, properties, investments. My entire life has been built around business and numbers and deals. And somewhere along the way, I lost something important. I lost the ability to know if people cared about me or just what I could give them." She listened quietly, her eyes steady and kind. "I started to feel like a walking wallet," he said. "Not a person, a resource, a tool. Even when people smiled, I questioned their motives. I stopped trusting. And then one day I decided to hide in plain sight, to wear simple clothes, to eat in simple places, to just be regular." He paused, taking a breath. "And that's when I found this diner," he said. "That's when I met you." She didn't blush. She didn't panic. She just nodded gently. "I wanted to see if kindness still existed without wealth standing in the room," he continued. "So I left that small tip. Not to insult you, not to trick you, but to to understand. And the way you reacted, it changed me. You didn't measure your kindness based on the tip. You didn't allow disappointment to harden your heart. You stayed gentle. You stayed grateful. And I saw in that moment what I had been missing for so long: honest humanity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt full, but calm. Finally, she spoke softly. I didn't know any of that, she said. I didn't know who you were. I still don't fully. But I do know that every person who walks in here deserves kindness. Not because of what they have, just because they're human. Life is hard for everyone in different ways. I can't always make it easier, but I can make it softer. Her words were simple, but they landed deeply in his heart. He looked at her, really looked. At the way she carried strength and softness together. At the way she had chosen kindness even when life surely hadn't always been easy for her. I want to tell you something else, he said carefully. But I don't want it to change how you see me. I just want you to understand. She nodded again. You can tell me, she said gently. I'm not just wealthy, he said. I'm among the wealthiest in the country. My name shows up in lists, magazines, news. But here, in this diner, I'm just a man who needed to be reminded of kindness. She took this in slowly. Her expression shifted, not toward shock or excitement, but toward reflection. She looked at him the same way she had before. Not up, not down, just straight across. That doesn't change how I speak to you, she said softly. It doesn't change how I see you. Money is powerful, yes, but it doesn't make you more human than anyone else. And it doesn't make someone like me less. Her words were gentle but strong, and they were true. He felt tears sting the back of his eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. For once, he didn't feel like he was being measured. He didn't feel like he was being assessed for gain. He felt seen. Thank you, he said quietly, for not changing, for staying exactly who you are. She smiled lightly. I only know how to be myself, she replied. That's all any of us can do. There was a pause as a new table of customers came in. She excused herself with a soft nod and went back to work. He watched her move through the room with the same grace as always. Nothing about her behavior shifted because of what she had learned about him. She didn't hover. She didn't act impressed. She simply continued doing her job with care and dignity. And that, more than anything else, showed him the truth of her heart. He sat there longer than usual that day, thinking deeply. About wealth. About trust. About the difference one person's quiet goodness can make in another person's life. He thought about the power of choosing kindness when it would be easier to turn away. He thought about how rare it was to find someone untouched by greed in a world that constantly chases it. When he finally stood to leave, he walked slowly to the counter to say goodbye. She was there, filling cups and wiping the surface clean. I'll be back, he said with a soft smile. You're always welcome, she replied. But what he carried with him when he stepped outside was more than a simple farewell. It was a decision forming, firm and steady. A decision born not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but out of deep respect for a person who had reminded him of the kind of world he wanted to help build. He walked down the street as the evening air cooled around him, feeling lighter than he had in years. His wealth no longer felt like a barrier, felt like a tool, and for the first time in a very long time, he knew exactly what he wanted to do with it. There was still one more step left, one more act that would carry the meaning of everything he had learned. But that would come soon. For now, he simply let gratitude fill the space where mistrust had once lived, grateful for a quiet diner, a gentle smile, and a heart that had stayed kind, no matter what the world had given or not given, in return. The decision the billionaire carried with him grew stronger over the next few days. It followed him from meeting to meeting, from room to room, through quiet evenings and sleepless nights. He kept thinking about the diner, the warm light, the sound of the little bell above the door, and the calm kindness of the woman who worked there. He thought about the way she treated everyone the same, no matter how they looked or how much they tipped. And every time he remembered her smile, the world inside his chest felt softer and clearer. He realized something important. His wealth had always been talked about in numbers. People spoke about what he owned, what he could buy, how powerful he was. But nobody ever spoke about what his money could mean in human terms. Nobody asked how many lives it could touch if used with love instead of fear or pride. It hit him then that money on its own was empty. It only became meaningful when it flowed into something good. And he wanted something good to grow from this story. So he called the people who handled his legal work. These were people who were used to seeing contracts, deals, investments, and sometimes cold choices. But this time, the billionaire's voice sounded different. There was warmth in it. There was purpose. He told them he wanted to make a change. Not just a small change, but a deeply important one. He wanted to rewrite his will. When they asked him why, he spoke honestly. He told them he had been reminded of real kindness, of simple humanity, of the value of work that often goes unseen or underappreciated. He spoke of service workers who spent long hours on their feet, treating strangers with respect while carrying heavy worries in their hearts. He spoke of how one woman's quiet gratitude and dignity had touched him more deeply than anything money had ever given him. He didn't tell them every detail about the diner, or the $5 tip, or the long conversations. Those moments belonged to his heart. But he told them enough for them to understand that this was not a passing thought. It was a true and lasting decision. He asked them to help him create something that would live on long after he was gone. A foundation, a fund, a legacy. Something that would support hardworking people in service jobs. People who smiled through exhaustion. People who carried kindness into their work without expecting applause. He wanted the foundation to help with education, housing, healthcare, and the simple needs that often go unmet. He wanted there to be grants, scholarships, and safety nets for those who gave the world their best with little protection in return. And he wanted it to begin with her. Not as a reward for passing a test. Not as a prize, but as a thank you, a recognition, a way of saying, your kindness mattered. Your heart changed something in this world. The legal team listened carefully, wrote down every word, and began the process. Took time. Papers had to be prepared. Details had to be shaped. But the billionaire felt calm through it all. For once, the future of his money no longer felt like a heavy question. Felt like a promise. When everything was finally arranged, he returned once more to the little corner diner. The air was gentle that day. The sky was pale and soft, and the city sounded quieter than usual, even though life was moving as always. When he pushed open the red door, the bell gave its familiar ring, and he felt a sense of home he had never expected to find in such a simple place. She was there, just as he had hoped, moving from table to table with that same peaceful grace. She smiled when she saw him, the same honest smile she offered everyone. "You're back," she said softly. "I am," he replied. He took his usual seat, and she brought him his order. For a while, they spoke lightly about small things, the weather, the day, the quiet beauty of ordinary life. But then, when the room grew a little calmer, he gently asked if they could talk again. "Of course," she said kindly, and she stayed near the table. He took a slow breath. He wanted to honor this moment with truth. "I told you before that I have great wealth," he said. "And I also told you that meeting you reminded me what truly matters. What I didn't tell you yet is what I've done because of that." She listened, her eyes steady, her heart open. "I've rewritten my will," he continued. "I've created a foundation in your honor. It will support people like you, people who work hard, who treat others with respect, who hold on to kindness no matter how difficult life becomes. It will help many families, many workers, many lives. Your spirit, your heart, your way of treating people. It inspired all of it." She blinked, surprised. Not because of the money itself, but because of the meaning. She wasn't used to being seen in that way. She wasn't used to her quiet kindness changing something so large. "I don't want this to embarrass you," he said gently. "I don't want it to make you feel pressured or watched. I simply want you to know that your goodness did not disappear into the air. It landed. It grew roots. And it will keep growing." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked down at the floor as if grounding herself. When she looked back up, her expression was calm and grateful. "I never expected anything like that," she said softly. I don't do what I do for attention. I just believe in treating people well. But if something good can grow from that, something that helps others, then I'm thankful. Truly thankful. There was no greed in her voice, no hunger for control, only humility. He nodded slowly. That's why I chose to do this, he said. Because your heart was pure even when you thought nobody noticed. And that kind of light deserves to be shared. They sat quietly for a moment, letting the weight of the conversation rest gently between them. Outside, cars passed by, people walked, life moved forward. But inside, something meaningful had settled. A deep respect, a human connection that went beyond wealth, beyond roles, beyond background. He finished his meal eventually, but he didn't rush to leave. They spoke a little more about life, about hope, about the ways small acts can echo far beyond their moment. And when it was finally time to go, he stood, feeling lighter and fuller all at once. Thank you, he said one last time. Thank you, she replied with warmth. The bell rang as he stepped through the door. The city greeted him again. But he was not the same man who had first walked into that diner dressed in simple clothes, trying to hide from his own wealth. He was a man who had rediscovered his heart, not through luxury or power, but through the quiet strength of a woman who chose kindness over bitterness every single day. Word of the foundation would eventually spread, as such things often do. People would talk about the large sums of money, the programs, the scholarships, the change it brought into many lives. But the true story lived in a small corner diner, inside a simple moment of gratitude over a $5 tip, and in the decision of one human being to stay kind no matter what the world placed in front of her. And the billionaire, for the rest of his life, carried that lesson like a soft light inside his chest. A reminder that real wealth is not found in numbers or bank accounts, but in the quiet, steady goodness of the human heart. He had gone searching for honesty and found it in the most unexpected place. And because of that, the world, even if only a small part of it, became a little kinder, a little safer, and a little more human.